Are you Invictus? Clint, are you Invictus? Are you Invictus?
What does it mean?
You know, when I started the Invictus Mind podcast, my goal was to unite a bunch of people who had a similar ideology or similar characteristic traits. Invictus means unconquerable. It's an old Greek word for means unconquerable.
Unconquerable.
Honestly, just be totally honest, it was a new concept to me. I had to Google it when you sent it to me. But yeah, I do my best.
Tell me about what the show. What is your audience looking for? Tell me.
This is your first time here. This is the #1 program dedicated to helping individuals maximize their potential and truly become unconquerable. Here we have discussions about what it takes and what it means to experience and magnify political freedom, financial freedom, and spiritual freedom.
Yes, I would absolutely say that. I'm going to keep getting up, right? And I keep getting up and I keep pushing forward. And that's the type of mindset that you need to have.
I never lose hope. I never lose faith. My mindset has always been, if I want something, I don't give up. So let me tell you what is the #1 issue when it comes to being unconquerable.
Okay.
And the #1 word you have to think about here is not intelligence, not savvy, not strength, none of those things. The #1 thing is resilience.
You know I'm Invictus. Come on. All right, I'm Invictus AF.
Well, may I have an initiation question for my tribe?
Okay.
Are you Invictus?
I believe I am.
So yes, I agree. I am Invictus.
I totally agree, man. And I think that if there's anybody on this planet that's unconquerable, it's probably me. I am not the type to take orders, and I am definitely in a position that I can stand up for myself right now. So.
And I was like, no way, I know what that word means now.
Yeah, man. Very cool concept for a show.
You didn't ask me if I was Invictus.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Invictus Mind podcast, the #1 show where the topic is how to become unconquerable. Here we have discussions on what it takes to achieve and maintain our political freedom, financial freedom, and spiritual freedom. As always, this is your humble host, Mike Corbell, and I'm very excited to be here. If this is your first time checking out the program, I want to thank you. And if you like the show, please give it a rating on Apple or wherever you get your content. And please share this program with 3 of your friends, because that is the #1 way we will get this show to grow. All right. You can always find this program on any of the podcasters as well as on YouTube for most of the episodes. Personally, I really appreciate when the video podcasters also broadcast on audio because, you can't always check out a video, of course, and it's always easy enough to put those earbuds in your ear when you're at work or at the gym or wherever you're listening to podcasts. Well, today I do have a guest on, but he asked that his identity be concealed, so we will be able to hear his wisdom, but unfortunately, we're not going to be able to see his bright face as we are recording. But he has been a guest on a program before. I will let him share his story again because it's been a while since he's appeared here, and there's a lot that's changed in his industry, in the economy, and on his podcast. I will share this, however. This man has been a close of mine for over 15 years, and in some capacities has been a mentor as well. He has been instrumental in helping me understand the money game, and although there are many times where we don't see eye to eye with each other, his persistent optimism has always shined brighter in my face of my sometimes black-pilled world outlook. Today, I've asked him to share his thoughts on how the average American family can understand what is happening around them, and despite the bad news, how they can potentially get ahead of the curve and not let the dark forces of financial uncertainty come over them. We do affectionately call him the Financial Ninja, and he is with me right now. How are you doing, Financial Ninja?
Doing good. And, probably just as a matter of disclaimer, right? It's not that I really need to be that secretive, but when you're dealing with money and finances and you're an investment advisor and license and all that stuff, you to go through the overwhelming layers of compliance just takes so much. And like you and I said, we just want to have a real conversation, right? I don't want to have to necessarily, throw 100 different disclaimers in what's being said. So I'm just going to give you my frank, honest opinion and kind of go from there. And I think we're probably okay if we stick to a first name basis too, Mike. We don't have to be that secretive, right? Frank the financial ninja is perfectly fine. There's enough Franks out there that we're probably good.
All right, because I'll probably slip a few times anyway, Ninja.
Oh, that's what I thought. So maybe it's just easier to go with, Frank the financial ninja. Frank, how you doing?
All right. Well, Frank, how you doing? So since we've been friends for such a long time, I have a series of questions, but I don't want to make this look like an interview that I've never met you before. So we can talk as regular people, as buddies here, and just kind of sort out what's going on in the world.
Well, whatever works for you and your audience.
All right. Well, I do have an outline here, though, but so I want to address something that it just makes me laugh. We seem to be living in what a lot of people are calling clown world. I mean, with fake news, and you never know who the true source is, and we're witnessing our institutions just giving us ridiculous, hysterical, and completely devoid of the truth answers. For everything.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of clowns out there. That's for sure.
And the latest farce being that although most economists will tell you since 1974 that 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP in America will be a recession. The White House is now saying that we're not in a recession or anything like that. So even though everything seems to be going backwards, what's your take on that?
Well, first of all, my personal take on that is if your family feels like we're in a recession, then you're in a recession, right? It doesn't matter how can someone else tell? That's like someone else telling you, hey, I feel sick. Well, you don't look sick, right? Well, you know what? I mean, there are a lot of people who their own personal economy has been very affected by the financial conditions surrounding them. All right. So whether the White House feels it's politically expedient to say it's a recession or not, I think we're not doing so good, right?
Well,
people are feeling the pain.
Yeah, many people for sure. It's funny because according to CNN Business, there was no COVID financial crisis. Because when the Fed, created all these trillions of dollars they printed post, pandemic, that wasn't going to lead to anything. And we have people like Paul Kruger out there saying, I couldn't have seen this coming. All the wisest pundits and economists that you see in the news, it was total shock to them. We're not doing anything wrong. I couldn't have seen this come. It's just crazy.
Sometimes you wonder if people are just stupid or liars.
Intentional or are they incompetent? That's the question of the hour.
Right. That's it. Yeah. Intentional or incompetent, one or the other.
So, and of course, like I said at the beginning, I always want to throw out the negativity because that's just sometimes floating in my atmosphere. And I got to come to you, Frank, to always, put me back into the right orbit because, there's so much negativity out there. And, I don't want to be one of these doom and gloomers, but just by nature, I'm kind of black-pilled on the economy. So we've seen just yesterday, I think the Fed raised the interest rates by another 0.75%. And I think that's really hurting people who are in the market to purchase a home because, you go to a lender and you have a plan to borrow money. And then maybe the housing market, which has been abysmal, has completely just shown you how bad it is really out there. And so now raising the interest rates again, people are even being able to borrow less money. And so I think it just comes to the shock to so many people because they've bought that lie from the clown world institutions that everything's okay, but then they get out into the real world and things are really hurting. You're definitely one of those guys that, just because of the industry that you're in, has a real scoop on what's going on, or at least you try to understand what's really going on in the market. But I like your mission of taking it to the average American, family out there who's struggling in all this.
Well, I think that's how you put your finger on the real pulse of our economy. Right? What is the average family feeling, thinking, and doing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's really your wheelhouse is that you deal with the average middle American families, the ones who don't necessarily go to the big wig financial companies to get advice. You were on the podcast before, and maybe we can kind of reiterate a little bit about what it is you do for families. But sitting down with just average American families who are often clueless about what to do with their finances, they're looking for people just like you to say, hey, what do I do? The world seems to be falling apart, but I don't want to ride that wave on a down slope. I want to go up. So who do I go to?
Sure. In fact, I'd probably take it even a step further. I don't think the average American is even thinking about riding the wave up and who I go to. I often describe it like this. When you're dealing with the average American family, like I sat down with someone who was he was working for a competing broker dealer, and it was down in St. Louis when I was still operating out of St. Louis. And he was working with one of the larger firms that's based out of St. Louis. You can go ahead and do your own research there. It won't be too hard to figure it out. But we were out to lunch, and I asked him, I said, what do you like the most about the firm that you're with? And he said, well, because we reach out to the average American family and, help them with their investments. And I have to tell you, I was genuinely intrigued and excited at the same time, because I really wasn't aware of anyone else at that moment in time that was really focused on that market. And so I genuinely asked him, what are you finding is the biggest challenge your clients are facing? And when he answered me with something that sounded something like, to provide them a proper diversified portfolio, the rest of it was like listening to Charlie Brown's teacher, want, because I knew in that moment he wasn't really dealing with the average American family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because here's the truth. The average American family is not asking themselves, where can I invest my money? The average American family is asking themselves, where the heck would I even get money to invest?
Right.
That's the real American family. They're struggling. Like, don't get me wrong, we're going to help them invest money. That's what we're all about. But before we even talk about investing money, let's talk about how can we increase your cash flow? How can we find some ways that'll put money in your pocket? And one of those is how to pay less money in taxes.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people that are paying way too much money in taxes, and they just don't understand the tax system. They don't realize that the tax system was designed for entrepreneurs, not employees, right? There's a lot of different things that we could teach people that are going to put them in a better position cash flow wise. The second great challenge that most Americans are feeling, the pain that they're feeling, second to the cash flow, which is only more exasperated by inflation right now, crazy inflation right now, is their debt. What happens when you don't have enough money to meet your cash flow needs or goals? You end up borrowing to stay afloat.
Mm-hmm.
And so you end up, it's kind of the same problem that our government's finding themselves in, right? Monkey see, monkey do. A government of the people, by the people, for the people. Well, sure enough, they're out there. As soon as they run out of money, they go borrow more. And what's the problem? You keep borrowing money, it lowers your cash flow.
Yep.
The more you have to pay in payments, the lower your cash flow gets. And you got to figure out how to make more money, or you're going to end up, falling behind. You're going to start losing ground. You're going to start, sinking underwater further if you don't figure out how to either stop your spending, cutting your spending, or B, increasing your income. And that's exactly how it works for the average American family too, right? How can we do that? And so part of that process is getting that debt under control.
Yeah.
How do we manage that debt? And that, it's surprising how easy that can be. Now, maybe the answer is, maybe the more accurate statement is how simple it can be. It's not easy because you got to stick to it. But most people, if they started putting together a real plan to work on taking down their debt, within a matter of 2 or 3 years, they will feel more financial relief. They will start to begin to experience what financial freedom feels like in just a matter of a few short years if they just stick to some principles, right? How do we help people have enough money set aside when there are emergencies, right? When there are problems that come that take some cash. What is the average American doing when they have an emergency nowadays?
They're borrowing it. You're
That's
using
right.
your credit card.
They're going right back to the feeding trough of the bank called credit cards, right?
So it becomes a never-ending cycle. I mean, let's just look at the last year and a half. I mean, obviously, although the powers that be will deny that this is true, we see the CPI has looked at an 8.6% increase, and everything. So the number one thing I think affecting most people is the cost of gas. Although, the administration will say, oh, see, it went down 60 cents. That's after the 48.7% that it went up just in the last year. I mean, people are paying an average of $5 a gallon, and now it goes down to $4.50 a gallon. And you're like, oh yeah, we're saving you some money.
Yeah, look, I don't necessarily want to get political on your show, and I'm not necessarily pointing fingers or necessarily giving credit, but something happened that was not the war in Ukraine, okay, that started dramatically increasing our cost in gas. Like it was literally under $2 a gallon in my state, right? In my state, which is one of the more expensive states, right? It was literally under $2 a gallon only a few years ago, right? And the cost of gas going up is, I think some people, and again, not to be political, so I'm not going to mention parties per se.
By all means, we can be political because I want to help my audience achieve political freedom.
Right? But there are some. But see, it's not like a party that's doing this. There is a segment of people in certain parties that they are almost happy with the idea of driving the price of gas so sky high that it's forcing people to look at other alternatives, right? Even though the other alternatives are not necessarily they're not really economic choices for the average American at this stage of the game. They might argue that if we force it, that maybe it eventually will become it. But if you starve to death along the way, what good does it do?
Well,
right?
They'll say if you can't afford $5 a gallon gas, then buy an electric car.
Yeah,
it's
right.
Like, okay.
Exactly. With what money? I certainly can't borrow it. The interest rates have gone up. I don't have any money in savings because I can barely keep my head above water, right? But that is, I think that's really one of the real sources of economic challenge for the average American is that dramatic increase in gas, because it's not just gas. The increase in gas causes a lot of food products to go up. It causes a lot of clothing products to go up. Right. I mean, it's just like I often talk about when we put together a financial needs analysis for someone, it's kind of like going to the doctor and you ask the doc, you got to be honest with the doctor. Where does it hurt? Right. If you don't tell the doctor where it hurts, they can't diagnose you. Right. And another good analogy of finances and the human body is when you got something wrong over here, it very likely is having an impact over here, right? Like, if I've got a broken leg, right? That's also affecting my blood pressure, right? That's also affecting how clearly I'm thinking, right? So same thing with finances, right? If you're hurting over here, or if you got something broken over here, it's probably having an impact with something over here. So the average American really is having a challenge with the increase of costs and price and everything. And but I also believe that I still think the market, at least at this stage of the game, I mean, it certainly could one day get a lot worse. This is where you and I might not see exactly eye to eye, right? I still think we're still experiencing cycles, right? We haven't screwed it up so bad that it's going to dive off the cliff yet, right? But in the meantime, hopefully, before it gets too messed up, we can turn the Titanic around to some degree.
So I agree with you on some level, but again, the conspiracy theorist in me is going to bring up some things. And just for the sake of my audience, I want to address the elephant in the room, because you mentioned it's a political thing, but not necessarily a political party. So there is this, for lack of a better word, force within the world, and some will label it the World Economic Forum. If you've heard of Klaus Schwab, he's like one of those James Bond villains, or Dr. Evil or something like that, right? And he wrote a book called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. And if you actually go to the World Economic Forum website, they have all these evil plans playing out in the open about how they're going to change the economy. And they say that, Agenda 2030, you're going to own nothing and you're going to be happy. You look at their website and they're looking at things like biodiversity and climate finance and zero carbon cities and, food security and Green New Deals. And so these world powers are working against the average person. But I think that most people don't even know that this exists. What's your take on that kind of stuff?
Well, I mean, I'd be a fool to say that stuff doesn't exist. Clearly it does. Clearly there are people that buy into that mentality. But I do have to tell you that I'm a strong believer in the human spirit. And I think that as much as these, whatever we're talking about, individuals, companies, organizations, maybe even governments, right, that amass a certain amount of power, which in this day and age, money is power, right? Which, that's another big thing I try teaching people, right? You want more power, you want more freedom, you need to have more money. It doesn't matter what country you're in, what system you're in. If you could figure out how to get more money, you're going to get more freedom. But I believe that the human spirit in the end is just too indomitable to be overtaken by these philosophies, right? Like, let's just talk with that first generic principle, right? You'll own nothing and be happy. Like any right thinking, common sense person, who do you know that can own nothing and really be happy, right? There is an element of, I think if you look at, and if I would have prepared notes for this, I could give you the exact name of it, but I think, is it called Maslow's scale of human needs?
The hierarchy of needs.
Hierarchy of human needs, right? And we need a sense of significance, a sense of accomplishment, right? And if everything is somehow given to you by some benevolent entity or organization, you don't ever get a chance to experience significance. And that's the highest, I believe that's the highest on the hierarchy, right? So, or self-actualization. I'm not sure exactly how it describes it, right? But yeah, of course, the idea of we just provide these basic things like food and shelter, right? Everyone will be happy. No, everyone will be mediocre. And that's the best that kind of philosophy could shoot for, is to make everyone mediocre. And the human spirit does not thrive in mediocrity.
Well, I wish I had your spirit and sentiment about that, because I've seen over the last 2 years that people just kind of go with the flow. They tend to be sheep, and they're directed to wherever they want. And so within the World Economics Forum, they're I don't know if you want to call it their evil design. There's this thing called ESG. Are you familiar with what that is?
Sure, exactly.
Environmental, social justice, and governance. And so all these big companies like BlackRock and where people are putting their investments, their 401ks, they're funding these evil plans. So these corporations are going green energy. They're going woke. They're making sure that they're their boards are diversified properly, and they're pushing this agenda, and people are going along with it, not because they're willingly going along with it, but because the powers that be are kind of prodding them along. And
or maybe they're ignorantly going along with it.
Maybe they're ignorant. Like, well, that would be the white pill that people don't know what's going on. So we do need people who are out there saying, hey, pay attention to what's going on. Because I think, as much as you said, having more money creates more freedom or something along those lines, where you're putting the money could be working against you as well.
Sure, of course. What good does it do to have money just to lose it, right? So that's important. But hey, I want to make a point, since we're just touching on this topic, right?
Yeah.
I understand that idea, right? That it seems as it's moving that way, but I got to go back to what I believe when it comes to human spirit, that eventually, when these powers we're discussing, when they have revealed their hand, there are always those people that wake up and go, what the heck? And the pendulum eventually swings back, because no one's just going to go along with stuff like that forever. I mean, I think, a very good example, not to be name dropping, but I love something I just saw. Elon Musk was basically calling the ESG out for the BS that it is, right? And you will start to see other players in the game that are gonna call it out, right? When people realize the nefarious plot unfolding, then there's going to be more and more people are saying, you know what, I ain't buying into that.
Right.
I don't agree with that. That's not how I'm going to fly. And I think ultimately the pendulum starts to swing when people push the ticket too far. There's almost a sense of balance to say, you know what, hey, bring that pendulum back over here.
You mentioned Elon Musk, and I was just reading a story on the news that, the whole deal with Twitter, him buying Twitter is probably going to fall through. But now his next thing, it might be a hoax, or it might be something he's going after. He wants to buy Disney now. So, he wants to be one of those mover and shakers, and perhaps, a good guy on our side. But we have yet to see what that's going to lead to.
Personally, I think Elon is crazy as a fox. And I don't think the Twitter thing is done. I think that is all by design for him to get a better deal off of it. I don't think he's done with it. I just think he doesn't want to spend as much money on it.
Well, that's possible. He's got enough money to burn. And, you mentioned that the pendulum will swing the other way, but people have to first be aware of the problems that exist out there. And so, obviously you and I have these discussions offline all the time about all the evil forces out there. But, what you're doing and what I'm doing is just making aware that there are tools for the little guy. There are plans. There is hope. There is a white pill, to speak in my audience's vernacular. There is hope at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely.
And so I'm gonna hopefully not insult you when I say this, Frank, because you're my good friend, but I would call you an agent of the normie. And what I mean by that is people in my circle who are so advanced, they're so intellectual sometimes that it hurts them, where they think they know what's going on, but they really don't know what's going on. And so what I try to do in my show is
or maybe it's dangerous to think you know what's going on and not pay attention to what other things might be taking place.
Well, and so that's the thing. So I've been told that I kind of bridge the gap between the conspiracy world theorists out there, maybe the libertarian minded or intellectual world, and people who are just kind of living day by day and not really sure what's going on. So I want to bridge that gap. But
I'll do my best not to be offended to be somehow lumped on the side that's not the intellectual side.
Well, what I mean by that is
I get what you're saying.
I'm probably insulting my own audience more than I am you, because I think if the world were to divide, you would be on our side anyway, Frank. So
I'm with you. I'm with you.
What
I'm
I mean
just
by
having
that,
fun.
What I know, and so am I. And this is going to sound really ridiculous on the podcast, but who cares? But so you deal with average, regular American families, and that's why I wanted to label that the normie world, right? People who are just
Sure.
want to live their life, right? They're not
Sure.
out there trying to solve the world's problems. They're not out there trying to figure out who the bad guys are, who's affecting them. They're not
Or
out
they
there.
don't, or they don't have the resources to go and do lofty, fancy, offshore type of things.
Right. Well, that's another thing. So you already mentioned a couple of things that the average American has to pay attention to. Obviously, putting more cash flow in your pockets and paying attention to debt. Now, are there a couple of strategies you can just throw out just for those two alone before we get into deeper discussion about that?
You mean as far as increasing cash flow, or
Yeah.
Well, I think I already kind of mentioned in the increasing cash flow that take a look at, for example, most people, they're getting an income tax refund check, right? And a lot of people think that's a pretty good deal. Well, that's not a pretty good deal. That's the government borrowing your money all year long. And finally, when getting around to, doing your return, they go, oh, I'm sorry. I actually need to give you your money back, right? And they don't pay you any interest. I often joke around, right? They don't take you out to dinner. They don't send you a thank you card, right? You don't get an extra special day off where you don't get a speeding ticket just for donating all that money, right? Like there's no advantage to you giving that money to the government. And there absolutely, as long as you follow the right rules, and of course, this is something you want to discuss with your personal tax advisor, but why would you let the government borrow that money all year long? Why wouldn't you have it in an account where it's making money for you? And then if you owe money to the government, then you pay it, right? I often bring up in this kind of a discussion, the wealthy don't get income tax refunds. In fact, the wealthy are very good at a word that I wish everyone was good at. The wealthy are good at leveraging. They're good at leveraging their assets. They're good at leveraging their resources. The working class of America usually lets other institutions or people leverage their assets. And why would you do that? Leverage your own assets.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And so take that money, put it to work for you. Don't let the government take that money and put it to work for them. It's interesting. I've been reading a book lately specifically about taxes, and I thought he had a very interesting take on it. The gentleman's part of the Rich Dad Poor Dad group of folks, and he said that some people almost have this mentality that it's not patriotic to try and lower your tax liability. But what he points out in this book is if you really truly understand the tax laws, the only reason you get tax breaks is if you do the kinds of things that the government is encouraging you to do. In other words, there's things that the government is saying, we would like a little help here, like creating more jobs, creating energy, creating housing, right? There are things that the government, the reason you get tax breaks is because you're actually helping the government do some of the good things that a government is supposed to be doing, right? And so that's why you get a tax break. So his point is it's actually more patriotic to try and pay as little taxes as you can.
Right.
Because the only reason you're able to pay as little taxes as you can is you're engaging in the things that the government has asked you to do. And so most people are not as patriotic as they should be. And they should be trying to reduce their tax liabilities.
There you go. So I don't know if we are reading the same book or not, but somebody else in the Rich Dad Poor Dad Foundation opened my eyes about the tax law itself. He said that the tax law is like 2,000 pages long, longer than scripture. And he said that like 95% of him talks about, how you actually can get away from paying taxes. Well, only like 5%.
That might be the same book.
How many?
That might be the same book because he points that out too, right? That like there's only a small portion of the tax code that's actually Here's the taxes you pay.
Yeah.
And then there's all sorts of rules on how to pay less taxes.
So as I believe that taxation is theft, I'm going to try to take advantage of every one of those situations I possibly can. So, but yes, I mean, so obviously inflation eats away at people's income, and debt is a problem, and taxes are something we can address. But how does somebody start making advancement towards saving something?
All right. Well, let me answer your previous question, because the first question, what are some quick examples? I gave one example of increasing cash flow. Yeah. Lower your taxes, right? Get some of that refund back now instead of waiting till later. Managing debt. There's a principle called snowballing your debt. And sit down with someone who knows what they're talking about and actually start working. Most people, we can have them out of debt, including their 30-year mortgage, in somewhere between 8 and 13 years. And are you ready for this? Most of the time without them even paying a single penny more out of their pocket than they're already paying in their current payments.
That's pretty unbelievable.
And it sounds like magic. It sounds like it's, no, it's too good to be true. It's not. It's math. And math is facts. And facts don't lie, right? And so it's just math. And it's just applying the right math. All right. And so, to be able to, as you pay off one debt, you fold that payment into the next debt and make sure you're using the right debts to pay off first. Right. And the right, there might be some restructuring you can do that would make a difference. The other thing that we're teaching is, I just said, how do you increase cash flow? Take some of that money away from Uncle Sam that you're just letting him borrow. Well, that also can be turned right around and used to help build up a little bit of an emergency fund for yourself. The reason people usually end up in debt is because something happens and they don't have the money set aside to cover it. So they got to go further into debt. The more you deal with that now, the less you're going to have to end up borrowing money to handle stuff like that. Right.
Sure.
And then you get into all sorts of other categories, insurance. That's a really important part of people's overall financial situation. I will venture to say that a lot of the financial hardship that takes place in our country is because people didn't have their ducks in a row, whether it's health insurance, car insurance, life insurance, disability insurance, long-term care insurance, like the list goes on, that there's usually something that happens that if they would have taken care of it the way they should have, they wouldn't have been paying so much money out of pocket. And then the long-term savings and investments, and that's the big one, right? That's the end game, right? My ultimate goal in what I do, it is helping people become wealthy. It is helping people go from that average everyday family to someone that actually has significant resources. And it means that they've got more freedom, right? And sometimes you got to free up some money over here so you can start directing it over here, right? So, and then we get into, what are some of the things you could put money into? Start talking about things like tax advantage investments. I love that. It makes my tongue feel good just saying it. Tax advantage investments, which means that when it grows, you don't pay taxes on it. When you pull the money out, you don't pay taxes on it. That's just wonderful, right? Tax-free retirement, tax-free income.
That tax-free is very attractive to me.
Yeah, right.
But there's a lot of celebrities or quasi-celebrities or well-known gurus, if you would, on the internet. I mean, obviously, in the information age we have, you don't have to go too far to get some kind of person saying, well, you need to put money in this fund, you need to put money in that fund, or don't trust this type of vehicle, don't trust that kind of vehicle. And it just gets confusing. And so sometimes, I'll say another mentor of mine had told me one very good strategy before going to a financial advisor. He said, if you win in the marketplace, or if you're going to win in the money game, you should know two things. Number one, you should spend less than you make. And number two, put your money in a place where you understand where it's going. And so a lot of people, how do they know where to look to understand where money is going? Because you hear of the ABC fund or the laser fund or the bank on yourself concept. There's all these different programs out there. How do they know which one is going to, be best for them?
Well, I got to tell you. So I want to emphasize that I share what I'm about to share, right? I because I'm independent. I'm what's known as independent in the industry, right? I don't have any skin in the game for one company over another, right? I've got just about every license you could possibly want, right? So I don't have any particular, I'm not saying that I can only talk to you about this particular type of vehicle because it's the only one I'm licensed to talk about. There's a lot of people that violate that, by the way. They'll talk smack about this and they aren't even licensed to even talk about that, right? I think, first of all, I agree with that statement. I love that philosophy, right? Obviously, spend less than you earn and then invest in what you understand. Now, that doesn't mean if you don't know about it now, don't invest in it. That's not what that means. It means learn about it. Find someone you can trust that'll help you understand it enough that you could feel comfortable putting money into it. I believe someone, told me a long time ago, right? You know this. It's just a general principle. You get what you pay for, right? If you want a good and honest mechanic who's going to fix your car, do the right job, they're not gonna try and put parts in that you don't need, right? Well, that mechanic is someone that has a wage and he earns what he's asking you to pay him. It may end up costing you less money in the long run because he's not trying to hose you over with this thing or that thing that you don't need. It's completely unrelated, right? Sure. You got to find a good, honest person that is worth their wage, right? Same thing with a tax preparer or a tax planner, right? In fact, my mentor said, Frank, there are two areas you need to not ever be cheap on. Make sure that you pay good money for a good tax planner and good money for a good attorney, right? Those two professions are worth what you're paying for, right? So that's important, right? It's not, I don't think that advice is saying if you personally don't understand it, you shouldn't invest in it. But I also equally believe that you don't go to a financial professional and say, here's my money, you figure it out. I don't know if I buy into that philosophy, right? I think you need to have at least a basic understanding of where your money is going and why it should be there. You should get a financial education, which is the approach that, our firm has always taken. We give people a financial education about what's out there, right? So I'm not going to necessarily say that, you should put your money in mutual funds. I'm going to explain to you that here's how mutual funds work, right? Here's how much it costs to put money in mutual funds, right? Here's how mutual funds are going to typically behave. Here's what kind of return you're going to expect over the long run having money inside of a mutual fund. Here's what's going to happen when you pull the money out of a mutual fund, right? Here's what you can rely on when it comes to what sort of income stream you can create using mutual funds, right? And then I'm going to turn right around and I'm going to say, here's another option. Maybe you could put it inside of something that we call actively managed accounts. This is where, it's similar to mutual funds because it is technically inside of stocks and bonds, but it could also be in futures and commodities, right? And you've got someone that's literally either a human being that has eyes on your account every day, or it might even be a computer that has eyes on your account every day that you give the authority to move you in and out as they see fit to accomplish your goals, right? And guess what? The mutual fund people are going to say, you don't want to do that active management because of this, this, and this. And of course, the active management people are going to say, you don't want to do mutual funds because of this, this, and this.
Because they have an invested interest in that money. So.
And I'm going to tell you that either one of those are fine options. If after you learn, okay, here's what it's going to look like. Here's what kind of rate of return I can expect over the long run. Everyone likes to show you a little segment where their particular thing has beat the crap out of everybody else. That does not tell you what it's going to do over the long run. And most folks, they don't have just 2 or 3 years to go. They don't just have 5 years to go. Most people you're sitting down with got a good 10, 15, 20 years before they're going to start accessing that money. So what has it done over 10, 15 years? Like, Mike, you and I have had conversations about certain asset classes, right? That a lot of people are super excited about these days. Maybe not super excited lately. Right?
I won't say that too loud. Bitcoin.
but you understand that you don't really have a history where you can say, here's what you can expect over the long run. Because there are some things that they're so new, you don't know what that's going to look like over the long run. Well, of course, every good investment, when you got in on it at the very beginning, took you to making tons of money. They like using the term unicorns, right? But the point is, how do you find a unicorn? Someone that's trying to tell you that they can find a unicorn, you probably ought to be a little leery.
Well,
right?
That's good advice.
Right? Because let's face it, unicorns aren't just roaming around in the wild, hanging out with a bunch of horses, right? So, for me, an average American family, it's not about striking it rich. It's about just taking smart financial principles, putting them to use, and know what you're putting your money into. Like, a lot of people want to say, variable annuities, don't use those. I'm not saying to use them. I'm not saying to not use them, but learn about it. What, like understand they're very expensive. You're going to pay 3%, 3.5% in total operating expenses. But there are some people that when they see that this actually can guarantee that they will never lose retirement income, no matter what. The account will go up and down, right? The value will go up and down, but it's basically like you're paying for retirement insurance when you're paying that extra money. So
and that kind of strategy would be good, especially as we see a downturn in the market. They paid 3.5% for the last 10 years, but now when the market goes down 10, 15, 20% or more, they're not losing anything.
Well, not only are they not losing anything, but a lot of these companies actually still credit you like a 5, 6, 7% increase every year that the market did go down. So for some people, that's a pretty good option. It's worth it for them to pay that 3. And keep in mind, by the way, just to be fair, when I'm throwing that 3 to 3.5%, that's the total operating expenses. You got to remember that the average mutual fund out there is 1 to 1.5% too, right? So it's not like you're not paying for these other products, right? So it's not that, oh, bam, 3.5%. No, you're paying maybe 2% more is probably an accurate statement, right? But, and that's not the only thing. There's things like index annuities out there, which that's a pretty interesting class, especially nowadays. There have been more and more creative things coming out of that world. And literally they have 0 annual operating expenses and have usually done far better than money sitting inside of a bank CD. Right. And so those are some options that people can look at. So, and again, I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm not saying this is the one you should invest in. I'm going to sit down with a client, as I think anyone should, right? We say this at the end of our webinars all the time. You should be as educated about your personal finances as you can be. Does that mean you got to know everything? No, but it means that you got to know enough, and you got to find someone you can trust that'll help you put your money in the things that you do understand and that makes sense for you. Right.
Yeah.
So I think, it's unfair. Well, if someone is telling you this is where you got to put your money, I just learned how to be a critical thinker. Right.
Right.
I just remember, I I grew up in Illinois, but I spent enough time in Missouri to tell people I come from the show me state.
There you
right?
go.
I drive my kids crazy. My poor daughter, Sarah, she would always come to me and say, Dad, I heard this, or I learned this. And then I would disseminate it. And she would like, Dad, can't you just, I can't. I don't take everything at face value, right? I am going to break it down, right? I want to, is this solid information? Did this information come from someone who has an axe to grind, right? Like a good example. Don't ask a Democrat if a Republican's a good guy. Don't ask a Republican if a Democrat's a good guy, right? Don't ask the Muslim if they think that, the Christian is the way to go. Don't ask the Christian if they think the Jewish faith is the way to go, because those individuals have an axe to grind, right? It's not that they're bad. It's not that their opinion's a bad opinion, but they do definitely have a specific perspective coming from a specific point of view, and that's what they're going to lean towards, right? I think when it comes to money and finances, you should ask yourself, what is this guy got an axe to grind? It's why you hear this word fiduciary thrown out a lot.
Sure.
Right? Because someone who's not a fiduciary, like a fiduciary means you are under a legal obligation to actually advise someone in a fashion that is in their best interest. You have to ignore what might be in your financial best interest and look specifically at what's going to be in their financial best interest, right? That's why it's a good, powerful word, because most people that are talking about money and finances, to be very blunt, they're not fiduciaries. A lot of them aren't even licensed.
Right.
So there's not even a consequence for them talking to people about the axe. They're literally sitting there telling you, go ahead and do this while they're sharpening their axe right in front of you. Put it in this thing, right? And they've clearly got an axe to grind. Well, I think it's smart to work with someone that doesn't have an axe to grind.
Yeah.
Someone that's just going to educate you, right? You should be as educated about your money and finances as you possibly can be.
I don't disagree with that at all. And I'm going to laugh because I mentioned Bitcoin before, but that's just part and parcel with everything you're talking about. I mean, there's a place for every single type of vehicle out there, and cryptocurrency has this purpose, and we may
get
not
educated about it, right?
We may not have even gotten to the point where we know what it's going to do exactly. But if you get an internet advice from your friends on Facebook about putting all your money into this Bitcoin, and then you see it evaporate 60% over the last year, then you're going to be mad at your friends on the internet when you could have just gotten educated the first time.
Yeah, generally, and I think another really good piece of advice is don't take advice from somebody who's broker than you are when it comes to money.
Sure, absolutely.
Right? Like I'm not going to take advice from my Uncle Bob about how to get good at playing basketball when the only basketball he's ever played is on Xbox. Right? So that's another thing, right? Yeah, get educated, but get educated by someone who really knows their stuff, has some experience in what they're talking about, which speaks to what you just brought up, Mike, right? Is don't just listen to your buddy. Don't just listen to some guy at work. Oh man, I made some big money off of XYZ. That does not mean go put money in XYZ.
Yeah.
In fact, it probably means it's too late to put money in XYZ.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so since you've been talking about education, I want to wrap up just to respect your time, Mr. Frank Ninja. You are actually involved in offering a free class to whoever wants to take a look at learning some more concepts about money. I believe you labeled it the financial revolution or something like that. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
They can reach out to you if they want to get more information about that. But yeah, we do have a little webinar that actually gets into more detail about learning about money and finances. Being able to get some more specific ideas on how to step up your game when it comes to money and finances.
Okay, well, for the benefit of my audience, then we have a website. You could just go to the revolutionstartswithyou.co. The revolutionstartswithyou.co, and once a month, we're going to be having a financial webinar and learning how the average American family can be educated and begin to take those steps, rather than going to the fake news that they see on the media and trusting whatever their favorite politician is lying to them about. And get educated, because that's the only way that you can truly find financial freedom, is if you know, either know what you know or know somebody who knows what you don't know, right? As a famous mentor once said. So hopefully you all can find somebody that you can build trust with. If you've been listening to me for a while, hopefully you know a little bit about me. I'm not going to steer you wrong, but that's why I invite experts like Mr. Frank on the program, so you can take a look at some of his advice. You got any parting words for us, Ninja?
You know what? I think I'm just going to reiterate what you just brought up, right? I do like that statement, right? Know what you know what you don't know, and know who knows what you don't know. And that's all you need to know.
Well, with that being said, I want to thank you for your time, and we're going to sign out, and we'll catch you all later.